Hi everybody, this is Paul from Wheel of Games. I was coming to YouTube with my review and recap of Episode 6, The Amerlin Seat of Sony and Amazon's Wheel of Time series. If you enjoy my content, please feel free to like, subscribe, and I also stream daily during the weekdays on Twitch between 11 a.m. Eastern Time and 2 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you'd like to come over there, we can discuss the show, talk about theories, and other things like that while I play games or I create games that I work on. So without further ado, let's get on to the episode. So I'll be one of the first ones to admit, pretty much every prediction that I had for this episode was completely out of left field. I'm starting to realize that I might need to wait until Amazon and Sony release the stills for the upcoming episode on Wednesday. Before I put out my prediction videos, because a lot of my predictions were actually immediately nixed based on the stills. So I'm going to actually go in sequence of the show this time and try to cover as much as I can about the episodes with as few spoilers that are unnecessary. But there will be some spoilers that are fairly necessary to the story. So, and at the very end, I will get into my thoughts on the episode as well as what I think that it did for the overall series and the television adaptation. So the first bit is that we start with a flashback with a cold open for the first time in 2 episodes. So this time we get a cold open and we get to see young Siuan. I'm not sure if they're going to adapt it where Tyr is pretty much a base of operations for the Sea Folk, because the Sea Folk tattoos are prevalent on her and her father. And this was a good piece of acting because we only had 2 characters featured throughout the entire thing, and you could convey emotion. It was very well shot and very well written, where we got all the information that we needed just from the performances of the characters, which was phenomenal. But we noticed that at a very young age, the Amerlin Seat, Siuan Sanche, was able to channel. And not only was she able to channel, she was very dexterous and very capable with the power, able to unbind rope for her father, who is missing a hand. We don't get an explanation for why he's missing a hand. It could have been something with a fishing accident. It could have been torture. It could have been a number of things, but the wound seems very clean, and it looks like it's been there for a very long time, and he seems very efficient with only having the one hand, like he's done this for years, but you can tell that he has some struggle, and she wants to help. When they return to their home after they've gone out for their fishing for the day, the dragon's fang has been scrawled onto a piece of wood, and their home has been burned down. I had to point out to my kids, as well as other people that were watching with us, that in Tyr, it is illegal for women to channel. Like, channeling is completely banned and outlawed. Pretty much the entirety of the kingdom of Tyr is like a giant kingdom similar to that of the White Cloaks. They do not believe in channeling. They think that it's evil. So that is why the father pushes Siuan to get in the boat and go down the river, and just to give him 1-4, and he says it'll never be safe for you to come home. Past that, we come out of the flashback and we have the moment with Logain being presented in front of the Amerlin Seat, and we get the presentation of Sophie as Siuan Sanche, and she does a fantastic job just emanating her presence and just acting the crap out of this role, and it was fantastic to see her portray Siuan Sanche. And she's very clear and concise. Why does he have chains? There's no reason for him to have chains. He poses no threat. But then she sentences Logain to something worse than death, in a sense where she says, you'll be studied. You will be, you'll be a figurehead for us to show that you do not oppose the White Tower, and you are a false dragon, and you will be paraded as a false dragon for the rest of your days. And by the end of it, he is screaming, just kill me, because there's twofold reasons. One, he feels like he has been stripped away of his power, which is obvious because of being gentled, but at the same time he now is being fated to essentially be that of an animal. Something to be shown off to the entire world as a prize to the Aes Sedai, which is terrible in its own right. But another point is, and for those of you that may be less refined in the books, whenever you deal with a channeler being gentled, they no longer have access to the equivalent of drugs. Channeling is like a drug. It pulls you in. It makes you want to continue doing it indefinitely. So if you're gentled, you no longer have that capability, meaning that you are going to never have life as satisfying as you once had it. So that is an aspect that can also push him to just say, kill me, which, again, this is another thing in the books. They have novices and accepted watching Logain throughout the books to ensure that he's not going to commit suicide, similar to what happened with Steppen. So, moving past that, you then have to have the judgment from the Amyrlin to Liandrin, because Liandrin gentled him without having a proper trial. And Liandrin tries to argue things along the lines of, we couldn't hold him, there's no way, blah, blah, blah. And the Amyrlin just says, stop. We have laws for a reason. You elected to go against those laws. You're in trouble. And Liandrin, being Liandrin, typically deflects and says, but what about, all this? And it goes into full White Tower politics. And it's so cleverly done, because pretty much it gets to the point where the Amyrlin is having to blatantly ask Moiraine to speak clearly, what has she been doing? Because Liandrin basically pushes everything on, let's pay attention to this problem, not what I did, which is politics 101. It's exactly what all politicians do. It's extremely well done in this sense, because, again, she says, oh no, I have egg on my face. I guess let's talk about that problem over there. And if we talk about that problem, then maybe you won't care about mine so much. And again, we don't even see a punishment by the end of the episode for Liandrin for her being outspoken and breaking, the laws of the White Tower. And what ends up happening is Moiraine says she cannot tell what her mission has been, why she has been out for 2 years from the tower, why for the last 20 years she's been disappearing regularly from the tower, which means that she's going to have to be judged. And Siuan states it'll be tomorrow. Once we get through this entire scene, Moiraine appears to just be able to take a breather and take a break, and this is a beautifully shot scene where she's just drinking some tea, but you can also see that this is her following her eyes and ears and finding and locating the boys. She's found Rand and Mat because of her eyes and ears, and she notices Nynaeve and Loyal, which that tells her, yep, this is exactly where I needed to go, and she goes in, and her and Lan both restrain the boys, which we get to see Lan pretty much say, you're just a farmer with a sword, and puts down Rand. And Moiraine heals Mat of the corruption from the dagger that he has been carrying. And there's a very touching moment where Rand comes out and says, thank you for doing that. And Moiraine blatantly states, I'd do it for anybody that was any of you. Like, he is stronger than he appears, though, because that dagger should have killed him. And it's an interesting moment, because it still leaves up that mystery for the non-readers of who could be the dragon. Could it possibly be Mat? Could it possibly be Rand? Could it be Nynaeve, Egwene, Perrin? It doesn't matter. And then within a few minutes, we also find out that Moiraine has also located Perrin and Egwene. Now, we didn't get to see them traveling to the White Tower necessarily after they were tortured by Valda and after they escaped. You just know that they arrived, and apparently someone just bungled them in with the Yellow Sisters and said he needs to be healed because he's bleeding. And they point out something very true to Perrin's character, which is that the scars on his back will never be there. He'll never have a wound from the torture, visible. And Egwene blatantly points out to Moiraine, at least not on the outside, which is so true to Perrin's character, which is that he always internalizes everything. But because he internalizes everything, he keeps and reserves all that, so he's constantly reminded of failures that he falls upon. So this is a good point in the story, but I also noticed that Perrin did not have any lines in this sequence, which was rather interesting. But you can tell because he's traumatized from the torture that he had to handle from Valda. And Egwene also makes a quip saying, he won't ever hunt your sisters again. But the thing is that we know from where she stabbed him, he probably did not die. So either way, she returns the rings. Moiraine says, meet me when I call you tomorrow. And that's the end of that sequence. So past these two sections, I didn't see Fane at all. We were in the Light's Blessing, and I think we heard the whistling, but I haven't gone back to rewatch it to do freeze frames to see if I find Fane. But I know that now we have Mat healed from the dagger. We have Perrin. We have acknowledgement that he's been healed by the Yellow Sisters. We have confirmation that Nynaeve and Loyal are still spending time talking, and We also have Rand appreciating the healing, Matt semi back to normal now that he's realizing that he's, possibly not the channeler, but he hasn't had that confirmed yet. And we have to move on to some more White Tower politics. So the leader, I forget the proper name for it. I could look it up, but I don't want to pull out, I don't want to go through the book on camera. But the leader of the Blues, the Blues Network's eyes and ears, essentially the top dog of the Blues, is telling Moiraine that she needs to stay in the tower. She has to leave for a while, so they need Moiraine there to be able to pretty much sub in, kind of fill in for her while she's gone and away, because she mentions for the first time that there are ships disappearing off the west coast. And this is definitely a nod to the Shan-Chan, almost 100%. Ships are disappearing, which is possibly the I believe it's called the Corinne, which is the return. So this is the first nod that we've heard of the Shan-Chan, pretty much at all. The first little rumblings of the Shan-Chan that we've heard of. And also, just to bring up one more point that I kind of forgot, they kind of covered the dagger with a cloth. In the books, they put it in a lead box that was 3 inches thick on each edge wall. So I don't know what the situation is, but I also know that Moiraine blatantly pointed out that if Matt was to pick up the dagger again, he may be completely lost. So I don't know where they're going with it or what they're doing with the dagger, but we'll come back to that, I guess, when it ever gets acknowledged again. So past this point, we have a moment where where another factor in the stories, another aspect of the magic system, is brought up for the first time, which is Lan stating that Moiraine masked the bond. This is the first time that we've heard the term masking, which masking in the books is very blatant. Pretty much the Aes Sedai has the ability to mask the bond in with her warder to where the warder can no longer sense where she is, feel her emotions, or any of that. So they've established for the last few episodes how integral the warder bond is between Aes Sedai and warder. So Lan is justifiably upset when he realizes that, Moiraine is not letting him in that little section. But he also makes a quick nod and says, "Give her my love." And we have the revelation that Siuan and Moiraine not only are in cahoots about what Moraine's been doing, and it was all a big song and dance in front of the Hall of the Tower, but also they are intimate with each other. This is nodded to in the books. It is not out and out displayed. This may annoy some people that are book purists, but it's also been a huge subject of, off-page romance between Siuan and Moiraine forever in the fandom. So anybody upset by this, yes, they're being a little more explicit with it, but also it was tasteful, in a sense. But at the same time, I understand. It's something that, book purists have kind of been up in the air about, but it's pretty much been soft confirmed forever that Moiraine is bisexual. And in addition to her being bisexual, her and Siuan were a thing when they were younger. And it was nodded to in The Great Hunt when they embraced and they saw each other for the first time in Fal Dara in private. And they kind of elaborated on this scene. So this is one of those aspects where you can tell that Rafe is pulling from multiple books in the future. We have confirmation that if they're found out, this is pretty much the entire scene, just, more intimate than what happened in Fal Dara Keep between Siuan and Moiraine. This is one-to-one, pretty much their conversation, post the intimacy is pretty much them just, having that full conversation that will be stilled if they find out that we've been working together. We'll be in so much trouble if they figure out that I not only got elected to La Armelin, but I've been working with you one-to-one for the last 20 years trying to find the Dragon Reborn, and we have included in the Reds. There's so much intrigue around this, and the reason why they can't do it. It's not black and white on the page. It's very nuanced. You have to think about all the subtlety, all the stuff. Even Moiraine at one point brings up stating, why don't we just bring in the sisters that we trust and tell them, about what our quest is, and that will explain why I've been gone, and that will cover everything. But Siuan blatantly points out, we will be stilled. This doesn't fly. We can't just do this in secret for the entirety of the last 20 years and get away with it. Even though I'm the Amerlin, even I have rules I have to follow. So it shows the establishment of the laws and Siuan, wanting to practice what she preaches, pretty much vetoes, says, don't tell anybody what's going on. But we also find out that Moiraine has kind of been pulling the strings with Siuan for the last 20 years. And they are very much, in a relationship between the two of them. But Moiraine blatantly states, I need to be sentenced to exile. I can't come back because they're telling me I have to stay in the tower and I have too much to do. And they cut out some stuff from the books here that kind of upset me, but it's understandable because the way that it's portrayed in the books is a little difficult to catch the first time that you're reading it. So first of all, just to kind of scrub all the stuff out of the way, we get mention from the Tinkers at one point that Aiel approached them and mentioned that that the Dark One plans to blind the eye of the world and break the wheel. We have mentions from other people. It's 4 separate sources throughout the story, all conveying the same message that the Dark One or someone is planning on blinding the eye of the world. The eye of the world is not very clearly defined in the first book. As a veteran reader of the series, it took me until 3 times through the series to kind of understand what the Eye of the World was. So to anyone that wants to say that adaptations are difficult, the Eye of the World is extremely difficult to adapt, mainly because the main MacGuffin of the entire book is not something extremely tangible. So for those of you that are uninitiated, here's the big spoiler. The Eye of the World is a pool of pure Sidene channeled into a physical form in a mystical place that is not supposed to be obtainable twice, protected by the Green Man. That is what the book that's what the book definition is. It is a pool of pure Sidene that is supposed to be used by the dragon to combat the Dark One at the end of the last battle. It's supposed to be an untainted pool of Sidene. I did not follow this the first 2 times I read the books. I just knew that it was somewhere significant, and I thought that the Eye of the World was a hiding place to put the Horn of Valir, which was supposed to be more important. So again, they changed it in the TV show. According to what Siuan is claiming that she's seeing in her dreams, the Eye of the World is the boar, which doesn't make sense. So this could again be a misinterpretation. Maybe it is Ashamael or Baal-Zaman attempting to lure whoever the dragon is to the Eye of the World so that they can strike at them preemptively. Maybe that's the situation. Maybe that's what they're going for, because again, we know that the Forsaken are knowledgeable of dreams and they are capable of implanting dreams into people's heads. So this is probably just them pushing what they desire to happen onto Siuan, which then makes her think that it's a prophecy, which then makes her send people, which it turns out to be a trap. So that's what I'm thinking that the narrative is, because the boar is supposed to be in Shal Ghul. The boar is supposed to be, this rent in reality. It's not supposed to really be the Eye of the World, but they may just be passing up what the Eye of the World is, because the Eye of the World is confusing as a actual narrative device in the first book. There's also a lot more that happens at the end of the first book that does not make a lot of sense to those that have not read the books multiple times. Jordan is fantastic at writing things and establishing foreshadowing and building up a cool magic system that has a whole lot of rules that you can comprehend the 3rd or 4th time through, but the first time through you have to dumb it down for the audience, or else it will be dead in their ears. They don't comprehend it, and I understand that, because when my wife was first reading the books, I would go behind her and say, do you have any questions? Do you have something that you need to understand? And so I'm hoping that this is kind of what they're doing. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe Siuan believes that the Dark One is weak there because maybe she sees Baal-Zaman and he's feigning that he's, injured or something like that. Because, again, this also pulls to where something later on in the books where, Rand is determined to kill the Dark One. And he has to come to reality that you can't really kill the Dark One. Like, even Moiraine at certain points in the book says you can't kill the Dark One. Like, killing the Dark One does not make sense, because the Dark One is not a person. The Dark One is an entity. The Dark One is a belief. It is a source of power on level with the Creator. It's complicated in that sense. But either way, so we have the exile scene. The exile scene is pretty much where we got that trailer shot where Siuan states, "Swear your oath." She states "swear your oath" because she binds, and this is something else that they did that's very interesting. She binds Moiraine to the oath that she swears to be following the exile. So pretty much in front of everybody, Moiraine swears on the oath rod that she will not return until Siuan orders her back. So what this means is, and she's very specific to state that it is Siuan that can only bring her back. So if we get into future events of the books, we have situations similar to that of the stilling of Siuan, where she is no longer the Amyrlin and things like that happen. Moiraine would still be bound to obey Siuan, no matter what. Even though there may be a new Amyrlin. She did not swear to the Amyrlin, she swore to Siuan. So this is one of those Aes Sedai gets around it with their words, and it's very specific. I did find it a little odd that Moiraine did state, I guess you could say pet name, or like she gave her all these titles that are not typically given to Siuan, kind of like a really close friend or a lover would give, which is understandable because we've seen them be intimate. But the problem is that she did it in front of the Hall of the Tower, so that's a little odd. But I can understand it. So either way, she goes to leave she flees to the Waygate, which we get that final shot of the Waygate. Now, we don't have the classic shot like they did for the magazines with all the people lined up in a row looking all cool, but Loyal decides to meet Moiraine there, and Perrin and Egwene come up with him. We get the full reuniting of all the Two Rivers folk, and Nynaeve starts demanding answers. She wants to know, what are we doing? And Moiraine says, I'm going to speak clearly for you. Here's the thing. World's going to end if you guys don't come with me, because we don't have time. I did kind of omit the meeting between the Amyrlin and Nynaeve and Egwene. Cliff Notes version, Nynaeve is Nynaeve. She starts acting, sassy, and Siuan puts her in her place, but without the use of the power. So it's kind of like the scene that happens between Siuan and Nynaeve in the books when they're going to Tar Valon from Faldara, and Siuan really puts her in a place and says, like, you have no control. No matter how strong you are, you have no idea how good you could be. And it's one of those things that pushes Nynaeve to want to be better. So I'm jumping back to this, but it's really short. Pretty much an off-screen conversation happens because Egwene owns up and says, what do we need to do? And obviously there was conversation between the two of them, and that's what convinced Egwene and Nynaeve to go to the Waygate with Rand and Mat. So, in the end, with all this going on, we finally get them going to the Waygate. We see that the Waygate requires channeling to open, which is a change from the books, but it's an understandable change. You wouldn't want just anybody to be able to open up a Waygate. And we get our first glimpse of the ways. There's thunder, which is a little odd, thunder and lightning, but it's scary, it's intense, and they're trying to drum it up for dramatic effect. And we finally cut to all of them going to step through the Waygate, and everybody goes in except Mat. And Mat's the only one that doesn't go through. And Moiraine lets the gate close, and that's how they end the episode. So again, this could be a few things. So the first thing is that maybe we'll get a cut with Mat having picked up the dagger again, and that could potentially be why he didn't trust Moiraine, despite the fact that he was acting more normal. Second prediction would potentially be this is how they had to get Barney Harris out to make room for the new actor to come in and play Barney, or to play Mat. Which, it's sad to see him go, but if this is the last episode that Barney Harris was in, then I wish him the best. He did a fantastic job playing the character, and we'll see what happens. But this makes sense for them to bring in, I think his name's Donald, to play Mat now. So, but that's where the episode ends. And we'll get a new one next week, which is, Darkness Along the Ways. And I guarantee you that there's going to be a full, conversation, screaming match between Rand and Moiraine, stating, why can't you open the gate again? Let him come in, let him come through. and it's just going to be him being hard-headed. He might have to get put back in his place again by Perrin, just stating he's already gone, same as he did with the ferryman. But at the end of it all, I just want to talk about my favorite scene from this particular episode. Again, I follow through with this every single time. And unfortunately, my favorite scene is not Loyal, because he only had about 5 speaking lines, which made me very upset because we need more Loyal. But he actually grew on me. I kind of liked him in this episode. I realized that it was shot a little different and there was a lot more lighting, but the prosthetics look good. So, that's just me. Also, notice that Moiraine has like a gold thing on her ear. That's a little weird, but hey, it's what it is. Favorite scene in this particular episode, though. Honestly, it's a toss-up. So it's either between the cold open, which I enjoyed seeing the origins of Siuan. It's not something that we got in the books at all. I enjoyed getting this bit of, character development, world building, aesthetics and other things, like her showing genuine care for her father, showing how powerful she is early on in her life, where she's capable of channeling. And her father even points out that she's more dexterous than she was, a week before, because she couldn't untie knots. And again, I just liked how they shot this. This was very well done because it had 2 actors in it. 2. You had a teenager, kid actor, and an adult actor. That's it. But I got the emotion. I understood what was going on. We didn't see another face throughout the entire thing. They looked like a legitimate, how a family would look, living on the river, doing what they do on a day-to-day basis, and trying to keep her a secret. I enjoyed that. The opposite end, in terms of what I enjoyed seeing, like in terms of my favorite scene, had to be the healing of Mat. I liked seeing Rand get put in his place and realizing maybe he needs to learn how to hold, sharp metal thing in his hand and not, just think it's a sword, swingy, I win, because that's the problem, is every time he's drawn that sword, he's had it, pretty much flung in his face. You don't know what you're doing. And it's a far cry from the difference between what we've seen with Lan with a sword and what we saw with Tam with a sword. And I also enjoyed how they did the healing of Mat, where it looked like, that darkness was trying to latch onto whoever it could latch onto, if it was being rent from Mat. And that evil, it kind of was like the taint or the corruption on the male power. So seeing it try to go into Moiraine and her closing her mouth and pushing it into the dagger. The only issue that I have with that scene, the only reason why the cold open actually was my favorite scene outside of that, is because what they did with the dagger didn't make sense. It also became this MacGuffin that is now on the floor covered by a blanket or a sheet. So that's the only issue that I had with that particular scene and why the cold open actually takes it for me. But between the 2 scenes, they were both excellently done because you got more establishment. You got to see Mat, kind of get back to normal. And I loved the bit of banter where Moiraine says, "How's Mat handling it?" And Lan just blatantly states he's well enough to be, downing mugs of ale like he's perfectly normal. And his entire personality shifted back to normal when he got back to the Waygate. So in all intents and purposes, it feels like we have Mat back, but then we don't, and he's gone because he didn't go through the gateway that Moiraine made. So aside from all that, that's my recap and review. I give the overall episode, I'm still giving them high. I don't give them rates, but I enjoyed this a lot. I really have liked every single episode. I like how fast they are moving through this political stuff, because the thing is, it's nice to see the politics of the Wheel of Time put on screen. It's nice to see things like this where we have, characters showing who they are, what they do, and, how much things matter, like actual consequences to things. I do get frustrated that Liandrin's punishment is not shown on screen, and I did enjoy the quip, and it's also a joke. It's like I'm sorry, I kind of laughed at it. I have to explain it to my wife, but not explaining it to the kids. But the whole thing where Moiraine says, "I know about the man that you meet in North Harbor," it's just funny because of the context of it, and the fandom and the community literally has a joke about North Harbor all the time when it comes to Tar Valon. So it's funny to me. And Liandrin's face is just like it looks like she just like bit into a sour grape, like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. And blatantly Moiraine states, "You know what your sisters will do if they find out about him." and it's hilarious to me. I mean, it just, that's what I meant by there are some mic drops. There's some moments where like the characters just backhand each other with words, and that's Wheel of Time when it comes to the politics. So that was really cool. But either way, we're gonna keep it at 30 minutes because I don't want to keep going. But I enjoyed this episode. It's not the top of the list, but I did enjoy it, and I want to know what happens to Matt. If we don't find out, then I hope that Donald does a good job portraying him. So either way, thank you very much for your time, and have a good rest of the night. Bye-bye.